You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo or honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker out there, you can try spicy ghost pepper, only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. Listen, I'm going to dare you to do it. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs that you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and then grab a few more napkins and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's.
And welcome back to the Golden Blogs podcast, the Bearcast, where we talk about your 15th ranked California Golden Bears, the only undefeated team left in the Pac-12, the only hope for the Pac-12 to make the college football playoffs. That's a joke there. And here we are. My name is Rob Huang. I'm one of the co-hosts with my other co-host, Andy Johnston. How are you feeling, Andy?
It's hard not to be feeling great right now. Not only did we just win the softball championship tonight for the second time, so back-to-back championships, but more importantly, Cal is number 15 in the country. They beat Ole Miss on the road. Looks like we have a quarterback. Not even looks like, definitely has been solidified. So things are fantastic. How about you?
I'm feeling great. 15 seems a little bit high.
Doesn't it?
We can talk about it in a little bit. But yeah, some housekeeping. I don't believe there's any other than some recruiting stuff with Colin Gamble, who just committed to us with a pretty cool video, in my opinion. He's on our commit list, and he adds more depth to a DB group that probably needs it going into next season. He probably also has a shot to play next year too if he performs well. So I think that's it for there. So let's just dive right into it. I'll give the folks the lowdown on what happened in Oxford, Mississippi. Number 23, California takes on Ole Miss in Oxford, Mississippi at Vaught Hemingway Stadium. The Bears beat the Rebels 28-20, led behind the 4 touchdowns of Chase Garbers. Garbers was 23 of 35 with the 4 touchdowns and interception with 357 yards throwing. His longest was a 60-yard touchdown pass to tight end Jake Tonjes, who ended the day with 3 catches and 88 yards on 4 targets, along with the touchdown. Jordan Duncan, the Mississippi native, returned to his home state with 5 receptions, 63 yards, and a touchdown. A very impressive toe-tapping, whatever touchdown that was. It was a great catch. And, of course, the other 2 going to Chris Brown Jr. and Trayvon Clark. Defensive stats for you here. Evan Weaver with 22 total tackles, 11 solo and 11 assisted, half a sack and half a tackle for loss. Koing Deng with 9 total tackles, 1.5 sacks and 1.5 tackles for loss. Evan Weaver also had 2 QB hurries. Some big team stats would be that the Bears converted 50% of their third downs with 6 of 12 from third down, and also scored 3 out of 3 in the red zone opportunities, all 3 being touchdowns. And that's it. That's the basic box score right there. So we should just dive into our points. And so here we go, Andy, your first point of the night.
Okay. So, first point of the night. Well, as everyone knows, I spent a significant portion of last week's podcast kind of talking about some concerns that we had out of our quarterback position. So, it's time for me to go on my apology train, which I'll be running till the end of this week. And then I think I'll be over it. But, so the first thing I just wanted to talk about was Chase in this game. So, I thought he had an excellent game. I thought he made fantastic reads. He kept his eyes downfield more than I can remember seeing in the first 3 games, and that kept defenders in their spots longer, which allowed receivers to get open. It was going through his progressions rather than just making his first read and then tucking the ball and running. It was awesome. He was throwing much faster. It honestly seemed like the coaches said what we kind of hoped and what we said in the podcast, which is, we trust you and just put the ball out there. And so much so, like Justin Wilcox actually said, they said on the broadcast that he's got to start playing like he practices. And I think that speaks right into what you kind of touched on last week, Rob. So maybe Chase listens to the podcast. Who knows? If he does, great job. You played fantastic. And I think the sidearm delivery was really accurate today. So that's the only thing that I could kind of pinpoint and sort of say, be wary of it, just because some of those sidearm deliveries were right on the money. And if that keeps up, great. If it, kind of goes back to where it was before, where he was kind of overthrowing receivers, then, some concerns. But best pass of the day, to me, wasn't even close. I think it was an out that Duncan ran. I'm not totally positive, but that sideline throw was just perfect. And Jordan Duncan the ball found him, and that's exactly what you would want a quarterback to be doing. So, I don't know. Clap it up. It was amazing.
Yeah, I'll just say this. I think with the whole notion of he has to start playing like he does in practice, that, I feel vindicated. I feel vindicated that my eyes weren't deceiving me when I was watching him in practice. Myself and Trace, we all said that he looked the best. People questioned whether Modster was really that bad. It wasn't that Modster was bad. It was just Chase was in better command of the offense. And I think you saw that, especially on Saturday. You saw Garbers. When you watch the game in a little bit, in a play-by-play type of motion or notion rather than, in real life game time, you see him grab receivers, move them, tell them you're still on for this play. He places him in the right spots. Tells the running back when he shifts an audible and the running back's moving, he says, no, you're back on this side.
Yeah.
It feels like he knows, that's what we've seen all throughout practice. He knows what he's doing. And you saw that translate the most on this particular Saturday. Whether it was because Modster was eligible and we saw him come in and throw a pass as well for 16 yards, maybe it was that. Maybe it was his back's against the wall and he realizes, hey, this is my do or die moment. And he just went out there and the game plan also, I think, worked perfectly in his favor, where it was just you have to pass for us to win. This isn't one of those games like North Texas game last week where with your feet or with the running back, somehow we can get this win out. No, they were stopping our run game and they were selling out to stop our run game. And they were saying, if you're going to beat us, you're going to beat us by passing the ball. And Garbers came out and did exactly that. My point that I wrote down that has to do with Garbers is Garbers was spectacular. Mechanics were great. There were some sidearm throws, but I went back and rewatched most of his throws, and a lot of them were solid mechanics. Great, right over the shoulder, kept the ball high, he pats the ball a couple times, and just goes through his reads and then just quick fires. And so his decisions were great, and the ball came out of his hands really quick. And so I think if this is a game to build on, and this is the turning point for Garbers, man, what a way to pronounce yourself to the fan base and to basically shut up all of the people that, all the naysayers, basically, whether that be guys who wrote or just the fans talking. But man, he absolutely balled out, and it's crazy because the exact same plays that we had in North Texas and with wide receivers open, Garbers was hesitant to throw to those guys. Some of those exact same plays were in the Ole Miss game, and Garbers rips it and just nails the passes down to get the multiple yards. The thing for me with Garbers that was very impressive, to say the least, was on his third downs pretty early in the game. Our Avi tweeted this out during the game. But he said Chase Garbers has converted a 3rd and 8 for 10 yards, a 3rd and 12 for 24 yards, a 3rd and 10 for a 13-yard touchdown, a 3rd and 10 for 43 yards, and a 3rd and 14 for 15 yards. So Cal was one of the worst third down converting teams in the nation. And at the point of this tweet, they were 5 of 7 on the day.
Yeah, and what does that
Incredible.
say? What does that say about the offense, though?
The offense as a whole.
Yeah, because to me, like, I could hear you say something like that and have a key takeaway that would, I would have my like instinct would be that that the running game was pretty ineffective. If we're kind of like constantly in those positions where we're getting like those really long, it's kind of third down plays, then we're not really executing on first and second, which is great. I just think that there might be some sustainability questions that arise from that. Like your ideal offense isn't, it's Sonny Dykes talked about this a lot, was like it's getting manageable third downs. And so I think like it was great to see us convert at that level, but can we sustain that over time? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll go on to my second point before I toss it back to you. Is my other point was basically on that, and what I wrote was Ole Miss deemed that our passing game was unsustainable throughout the entire game. They doubled down against our run. Garbers continued to throw, but Baldwin ran enough running plays with like the 2-3 yard gain, just enough to keep the Ole Miss team honest against our entire offense. And I mean, let's put our shoes in the Ole Miss coaching staff's shoes. All right, you're watching 3 weeks worth of Cal game tape, and the passing game is nowhere to be seen in those 3 games. All right, it looked like a quarterback who's afraid to throw. So if you're game planning for this Cal team, what do? You basically say, hey, if we stop their run and we force them to throw, it's going to be our game because the quarterback is not throwing well. And they have 2 running backs that are really good. But if we can bottle them up and just take away their run game and force them to throw on us, I mean, if I was a defensive coordinator, if I was Mike McIntyre, I'd like my chances at that and just say, hey, we're just going to stop their run and we're not expecting them to throw great. And that's exactly what they did. But then, of course, I'm sure the Cal staff knew this and basically went to Chase and was like, we're basically not going to win this game unless you throw the ball. And he came out and he's slaying. So that's why I think the unsustainability thing, yeah, there's some aspects of the game that's unsustainable. But then at the same time, if they're stacking the box with 7 or 8 guys constantly with like one linebacker on a QB spy and the outside linebackers just running out to a zone in the flat and just setting the edge that way and just forcing us when we're running just to go up the middle at their pretty big defensive line. I think this played exactly as I expected them to. Their defensive line was going to stop a run, and that's where they've been the most successful from the Ole Miss defense. And so, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I think happened. And it wasn't a chess game per se, but it was just an execution and a gamble that paid off for us in the long term, weirdly.
Yeah, I think what you're highlighting is the fact that, like, you're right, they executed against the game plan super well. So you could point to like the sustainability of it, but ultimately, if it's just executing against what the defense is giving you, then I think that's a great point. I also actually, this flows really well into my second point, which was I thought this was like one of Beau Baldwin's better, if not best, called games.
I think it's his best one.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that touchdown to Trevin Clark was unreal. That play design was awesome. The play action and he just was totally freed up. So I really think that this game was, I also think that call was the call that we've been looking for so long. Taking advantage of the play action. So all in all, I think Beau Baldwin definitely gets a big win on this one for, just beating a really good defense. You talk about Mike McIntyre. He didn't just have 3 game tapes. He had a full game against this Cal offense where our defense won us that game. So he had experience kind of shutting down our offense. And, and then obviously all of his intel being a Pac-12 head coach. So that's not an easy task. And so for Cal to come out and, do something different than what we did against UCLA last year, it was really, really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, Bo Baldwin's thing was that he wasn't conservative today, right? Like, he would call pass plays on third down, and we've been clamoring for that all season long. Like, it would be like we'd be in 3rd and 10, and then he would call up a read option or a draw to the running back, and it was just like, what are we doing? Like, we need to gain yards, we need to start marching down the field. But finally, he started being a little bit more aggressive in his play calling, and was like, all right, it's 3rd and 10, we're like on our own 15-yard line, we're gonna pass, and then Chase converts it, and then we go a little bit tempo, and we get more yards. Like, the first, I mean, there's not much. We don't need to go further than the first drive of the game. Like, Chase Garbers pass complete to Dancy for 2 yards. Chase Garbers pass complete to Crawford for 11 yards. Chase Garbers pass complete to Crawford for 17 yards. Dancy runs for 3 yards. Garbers pass to Remigio for 15 yards. Garbers pass incomplete to Remigio. Chris Brown runs for 2 yards. Garbers pass complete to Brown for 10 yards. Garbers rush for 4 yards. Garbers pass complete to Trayvon Clark, 6 yards, touchdown. Like,
yeah, unreal. That's first drive of the year easily, and maybe of the last 2 years.
We scored on both our opening drives for both halves.
Yeah,
like that's unheard of.
And I think, I wanted to ask you this: like, are we seeing the benefits of Bo Baldwin as play caller and QB coach?
I mean, it's tough after just one game, but if we're going off of this, yes. I mean, maybe finally he feels comfortable being able to open up and call everything with his offense and with all of his guys. I mean, the thing that the sunshine pumper, like, hopeful guy in every game is with, especially with this offense, is just saying, hey, we got to give these guys time. Like, they got to gel, they got to play more games together. We basically changed out our entire skill group, right? Like, the running backs have changed and the wide receivers have totally changed. And now with an actual quarterback, not a two QB system, but with one guy cemented, like, he needs to be able to build up some of that repertoire and some of those little tiny intangible things with his wide receivers. And I think maybe we're finally seeing that. Maybe we're finally seeing the normal progression of how things are supposed to go, where guys get better as they get experience. Oh my goodness, say it ain't so. Like, that, it's prone to happen. I mean, I just don't know if we can sustain it going into however many games, but I mean, this is probably the most hopeful this fan base has been in quite some time.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be telling I don't want to get in too much into this, but it'll be telling to see kind of what crowd shows up on Friday.
Yeah. And we can definitely talk about that towards the end of the show.
Let me get my negative points out.
Go for it.
Sweet. So back to negative.
I got a negative point too. So just toss me it and I'll toss back.
Great. I really didn't like the decision to punt with 3:25 left in the third quarter. You had them reeling as a defense.
Was that the 4th and 1?
It was like the third down play that it might have even been the monster play where we gained like, an unexpected like 15, and it was like super close. Yeah, I think it was probably like 4th and 2 or something like that. Anyways, it was obviously we decided to punt the ball, and I can't remember if it's Coots or not who kicked it, but it like bounced at the 25, bounced backwards, and or like to 20 and bounced back to the 25. So it was like a gain of 15 yards, and which is just nothing. And then on top of it, you had this opportunity to get points on the board, and the game's 3 scores. Like, you had a 51-yard field goal, which we know Greg Thomas is money, but within 40. So like, I think that might have should have been on the table. And then like, yeah, you get that first down, you put points up on the board, even if it's just a field goal. It's a 3-score game, and none of that ending happens. And now we have 2 games where we've had big leads, we've frozen up, we bled clock, and barely won at the end. And there's concerns for me a little bit in that. We get really conservative. So I'm curious what your thoughts are. Is this a strategy that you like, and am I allowed to complain when we're 4-0?
I think it's a viable complaint because we're talking about the sustainability of consistently winning, right? And when it comes down to that, everything is scrutinizable. Like we got to look at every single thing and be like, if let's say we're winning on 50-yard touchdown passes from Garbers every game, like, is that sustainable? Like, no matter if we're like 4-0 or not, like it's just things we got to be able to look at. And yeah, I think definitely, I'm looking at the play-by-play here, and I'm looking at it, and so we were on the Ole Miss 38. It was 4th and 5, and Stephen Coots punts the ball. This is actually the funny part because this is where Ole Miss called the timeout. So Modster passes to Hawkins for 16 yards, gets out of bounds at the 38. That was on 3rd and 21. So then we get into their half, and then Ole Miss calls the timeout, and this timeout is the one that comes to bite them in the butt.
And Ryan Leaf on top of it was like, yeah, might as well burn the timeout because you won't even need them. You never really need them.
Yeah.
The end happened. I was like, boy, that wasn't a good call, Mr. Leaf.
Yeah. I mean, Ryan definitely couldn't have called how the game was going to end, but if you're the team of the losing, if you're the head coach of the losing team, like the one thing you don't want to burn easily are the timeouts. Like you want to save them as much as possible. Just in the case of like what happens is you somehow get it close and you get it within one score, and you need those timeouts, whether it's on the drive or case in point is what happened on that 3rd down with 18 seconds left to go. And we can talk about that whether it was a touchdown and stuff towards the end. I think that's a good thing to end on.
For sure.
Yeah, I guess my negative point was that the DB struggled to tackle. It was very weird.
Yeah.
They took the right angles, but they took maybe too low leverage at times. They also had 3 interception opportunities that I could count, including one in the 4th from Ashton that probably would have sealed the game, but they just couldn't convert any of those interception opportunities. But yeah, it was very strange for us to like. It was the opposite feeling, right? Remember when we used to watch Jared Goff and we used to watch that offense run, and we used to just sit there and we'd be so relaxed, right? Like we just know that barring like some crazy thing happening, they're gonna march down the field pretty easily. That's how we feel about our offense and our DBs and everyone making tackles now. But then there was this weird feeling of like Jalen Hawkins misses a tackle, like Travion Beck misses a tackle, Cameron Bynum misses a tackle, and it was like, oh, like what is going on? Like, why are these guys not wrapping these guys up properly? And some of them were just freak ones where they made good contact, but the wide receiver or the running back would just somehow squeeze out of it and get the extra yards. But I don't think it's a point of concern, but it was definitely a point of interest for me watching the game and how they never kind of figured out like what was going on, because they seemed to struggle to tackle even the whole game.
Yeah. No, I mean, you could make a case that there's fatigue involved and we're running out, the same guys and not getting into our too deep as much as we possibly should be, because we, have to have them out there in a game like North Texas. And, some of that stuff adds up. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely noticeable that the defense, like, it was really weird because like you had the lapse sort of at the beginning, and it was like, oh, this isn't going to be as much of a defensive battle as we thought. And then the 3rd quarter, we dominated, like absolutely dominated them. And then the 4th quarter, you kind of had those freak plays with like Plumlee, who kind of came in and, it was like Tim Tebow.
Yeah, that was probably that's probably one of the things too as a coaching staff they just did not prep for. Like I believe he's a freshman.
Yeah.
And the cool fact there is that he actually played with Jordan Duncan at that high school where Brett Favre coached. When Jordan Duncan was a senior there, and Plumlee was a freshman on the team. Jordan Duncan played both sides of the ball. He played DB, and he actually played DB with Plumlee. So they have a connection there, and there's a picture of the two of them hugging after the game, which I thought was a really cool moment. But yes, continue.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those. I do think it reminded me in a really weird way of the Rubenzer plays from the Northwestern game. When you just sort of had Carroll really like locked down, and then it's just like this freak like rib injury. They weren't going anywhere. They're like barely struggling to get first downs. They barely converted that fourth down play, and then you just get this like fresh legs in the game. It's gone. And boy was he fast. So it was wild. It was wild to see them struggle in that way. And I agree, the tackling was pretty front and center. But I mean, still they still don't give up any points. It's an amazing thing to watch.
Yeah. I'll go on to another point of mine that's I think it's like half negative, half positive. So the big thing with the defense was that, one, they didn't have the bodies. Cameron Good and Tevin Paul and Ben Hochschreider and Chinadu were all ruled out on with a game time decision. Chinadu actually was just announced today by Wilcox at media availability that he will be out for the remainder of the season with a lower body injury. The other three guys they're hoping will be back. Wilcox actually kind of explained to the media today about, because we keep asking questions about, like, is he back? Is he back? Or is he coming back? Is he coming back? And he basically explained, like, the sports medicine team will tell him every single day if they're able to go or not. Sometimes it's even up to a game time decision, which I think is what happened with Cam Good and Hochschreider and Tevin Paul, because the three of them practiced. Three of them, I believe, were suited up and on the sidelines. So I think they're close to coming back if they were that close and it was a game time decision, which is great going into Pac-12 play to have those guys back after basically taking 2 weeks off. But the thing was, our interior defensive line is still an issue, and running between the tackles from the opponents is still, and stopping them is a big thing. We kind of masked over it in the Ole Miss game, because when I was looking at the tape, what we would do is we would sit our DBs back far. That's why you saw a lot of the passes getting complete to the outside for 8 to 13 yards, because our cornerbacks were basically saying, you're not going to beat us deep. Like, we're going to keep everything in front of us. And because our interior defensive line struggled with run defense, we would have to put one of the safeties basically down into the box and get that additional help in. And I think that's why they put the corners back so far. Plus, we also know our corners can defend guys on an island. So you have that luxury of being able to do that. And that's why you saw Jalen Hawkins make a crap ton of tackles today, and also miss a bunch as well. But yeah, it's just a point to look at going forward, whether getting the edge guys back to maybe help set the edge and also help in that run game defense. But that's to be seen, and I guess we'll get a better look at it come Friday.
Yeah, definitely. So how did we get here? Can we do a quick recall of the Dykes era and why this feels so different? And then, like, what a season kind of like what we're having could sort of set up this program for in the future?
I mean, in what sense?
Well, I think, ultimately, is this the type of season where, I personally think that if Cal, let's say, wins the 9 games that originally had us winning, and you sort of get the team on the national stage and top 15, you're probably looking at DeRuyter getting poached, Baldwin leaving for a head coaching gig, and then somebody maybe coming after Wilcox as well. Do you think that the program is set up now where you have these heir apparents where it's like, you have the foundation for Cal to be consistently good going into the, 2020 and beyond? Or, is it the opposite where Dykes sort of leaves town and we needed a full system reset outside of, maybe promoting Spav to being head coach? There wasn't really that person that we had internally that was like, okay, this is the foundation that has been laid. Now we can just continue to build upon it.
I think it's the latter in my eyes, just because I guess we can kind of bleed this into some fan questions or listener questions that we had. But I guess before I answer your question, do you have any other comments about this game in particular? Because I do want to move on to like what this win meant and the bigger picture going forward. And you brought up a great point of the future of it, and I think it's a good topic. But any other remaining like smaller questions or comments about the game?
I see it. Dismissing my fourth point, eh? Okay. All right. My only last point about the game was like, let's just talk about how ridiculous Evan Weaver is. He had 12 tackles in the first half with 2 QB hurries. He had the game-saving tackle, 22 tackles by the end of it. He Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Week again. And also, like, his shit-talking game is A+.
Pretty much.
So,
Bears in 4, baby. Bears in 4.
Yeah, it was just unbelievable. He's awesome. And I love the stuff that they talked about, how like it seemed like he was, he plays in an era like 1989. It's just ridiculous how lucky we are to have this guy. And boy, I'm just like consistently telling myself, like, take all of, give me all the injuries. I can deal with it. Just stay healthy.
Please. And then I guess my last point on that kind of subject is that the O-line depth is a bit of a worry because we have to move Alston back to outside linebacker, and he played outside linebacker right away. But then at the same time, knowing those guys got game experience and knowing that Tevin Paul and Cam Good are not out due to season-long injuries and that they were practicing and they were suited up, this actually bodes well for us later on, because now you have guys that have game experience and can play in games, even though the games might be more intense within conference and more on the line. These guys have been there now. These guys have played significant amount of snaps in key moments of a tight game, and they're going to be able to spell these guys when need be. And now, as a coaching staff, you also have that trust because you saw them perform and saw them get that game experience in, especially against an SEC opponent like this. So this actually kind of really worked in our favor, where we don't have our starters, but they're not out for the whole year. The backups got plenty of game time, and they're young too. So it's just a total like a great distribution of experience and playtime.
Sure. I think everything that Steve Greatwood believes in, of switching guys in and out of different positions and everybody, learning every bit of the offensive line, like, it's super helpful. You've seen sort of the dividends of it. I thought the O-line played really well in the first half of the game. I mean, just mainly in pass blocking. Like, pass protection was really solid. Like, Garbers had a ton of time on a lot of those throws, and that's a really tough defensive front that Ole Miss has. So all in all, I was like really impressed. I know we didn't run the ball well, and we weren't getting the best push up front on some of those plays, particularly at the end of the game. For what we have up there and the injuries we've seen, like particularly losing somebody like Will Craig and then having Del Toso be out, they've exceeded expectations. So it's been great.
All right, let's go back to that question that you had. All right, about what this means. Here's my take on it is, God forbid, let's say Will Cox leaves. God forbid Tim DeRuyter leaves, which I think is in the realm of possibility, a lot higher than other things. And let's say Beau Baldwin leaves. I think
mass exodus. Goodness.
Yeah. Just for the sake of the argument, because if one of our coordinators stays, I'm pretty sure it's pretty easy to push one of them up to the head coaching position. if Wilcox were to leave. But let's just say the top 3 guys are gone. Then you got to replace from within. It makes the most sense that you would want to keep this consistency of a defensive-minded team and a defensive-minded head coach going. The easiest person to put into the head coach slot would be Coach Sermon. He was a head coach, and he is labeled as the associate head coach. So that I think that plugs in right away. He brings the same type of mentality. Is coaching inside linebackers. It's perfect, in my opinion. Then from defensive coordinator, I think you have to move GA into there, right? It makes the most sense for him to be pushed up into that slot, and I think he's probably going to be pretty good at it, in my opinion. Offensively, I don't think there's anyone there that could take over that. I don't think Greatwood's probably towards the end of his career where he doesn't want to make another, jump up and have more duties. I think coaching O-line is his thing. Where does that leave us? It leaves us with Tui, it leaves us with Burl Toller, and it leaves us with Nick Edwards. I don't think any of 3 of those guys are offensive coordinator material, so Sermon would probably have to bring in another guy, which all in all might not be a bad thing. But yeah, I think that's the route you go if all 3 were to be poached. The big thing is how you end this season, because the way you end this season, I think, determines our recruiting, determines like our name having more value as a football program, and brings that name value of Cal football back to prominence again, like it was back in the 2000s. And we desperately need to get back to that point. But as Wilcox and the team has said, like, rankings right now really don't matter. It only matters where you're ranked at the end of the season. And if we're ranked in the top 15 by the end of the season, and we don't even have to win the Pac-12 North. We don't even have to win the Pac-12 championship game. Like, let's say we end second in the Pac-12 North and we somehow end up in the top 18-ish in the nation. Like, dude, that's a significant win considering where we were just 3-4 years ago, and how much Sonny Dykes did a great thing of uplifting the program out of the tail end of Tedford's career, but then Wilcox to be able to turn it around and manufacture that in 3 years, absolutely incredible. But at the same time, here's the thing on Wilcox is I don't believe he'd leave. He got the opportunity to go to Oregon, and he said no. He said, this is the place I want to be. And you can read that in the Mike Silver Q&A we did for Big Game Week, and that backstory of how Mike Silver was contacted by Wilcox to basically put out there, like, yeah, I don't want to leave. This is the place I want to be at. And if he was able to spur his alma mater and Oregon, like the recruiting advantages and the support you get from a school like that, there's not and he's from the West Coast too. Like, I don't think offering him a head coaching position in the Midwest or on the East Coast is going to be enticing him enough to leave. And I think he's here. I legitimately think he's here for the long haul.
Yeah, me too.
That's my take.
I think so too. I think it's good conversation. I sort of saw some of our Travelers Hates Thursdays guys tweeted out, how is Wilcox not like number 1 on SC's target list right now? That's an interesting one, and I think it's probably the only one that I would be concerned with. But Helton might pull off his usual 8-4 season and save himself one more year. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I think that's the only one that I could see you sort of have the same attributes that you mentioned with Oregon, and then he already has ties there. I personally think he seems really happy in Berkeley. It's been very, like, to throw it all the way back to the Dykes era, we heard about how Sonny said this is a sleeping giant at Cal, and we've sort of seen Wilcox go and lean into this and turn this program into what we all sort of had seen it been back in the days of Tedford. So do I see him leaving after building all this momentum here and really setting us up for, success and battling in the top 4 positions in the Pac-12 for the next few years? Nope. But you never know, man. It's always one of those things we want to be aware of. I think it's interesting. GA is as D coordinator. I did not think of Sermon as head coach. Sort of is there. I do think DeRuyter would probably be my first choice if he was not to have to leave. And I don't know about Baldwin because he's so offensively minded. I would be kind of confused about where the identity of the program would be headed.
Yeah, that's why I wouldn't put Baldwin in that head coaching spot, because you've gave Wilcox 3 years to build this identity. If he were to leave, you're going to flip that right back to an offensive coach. Like, it makes no sense in terms of how you build a brand. And I don't think Knowlton's that dumb to be able to look at it and go, okay, yeah, let's just throw him in there because he's the only guy that's left out of the 3 guys that are there. Like, he's gonna try and make sure that this brand that Wilcox has created over 3 years continues.
Totally agree.
So we have some fan questions about the football season and beyond. So let's take a look. We got one that says there's 2 that I kind of want to merge into one. So it's one that was, can you go through the rest of the schedule and give us your predictions? And the other one was, do you think Cal is a legit 8-4, 9-3 team, or have they just been lucky so far? So I don't know. Do you want to go first on that?
Cloud 9 wins, baby. Been there all year. I think I dropped it down to 7+1, so 8. I still think we're 8-9 win team. We're gonna get the loss somewhere where we're not seeing it. So I keep coming into this, and I'm like, is Arizona State a loss at home? Like, I don't know. I have been calling Oregon a win since preseason. The one loss I had was Washington, which we got a win out of. I think, yeah, you could say that one was, somewhat fortunate, but I don't really see these as lucky wins. A lucky win is when Washington State misses the point after. A lucky win is when Texas drops the ball before going into the end zone. I'm hinting at some things from a previous era. So let's go through it. Like, we have Arizona State. I think we win at home to go 5-0, which is nuts. So it's kind of crazy looking at the schedule, because you start to get into you get out of Cloud 9 wins and into Cloud 11 wins.
Oh my goodness. We're not, no.
I'm just saying there's not a single game on there, like, because I called Oregon to win. I think that you could push back on that one and say that's going to be a really tough game. And if you call it a loss, it makes a lot more sense. But I've been saying we're going to beat Oregon in Autzen from the get-go, and I'm not going back on it now. And so I say, like, I think we'll beat Arizona State. I've been calling Oregon to win. I think we beat Oregon State. Well, Utah might be a loss. I think that's definitely one that I think will have a hard time winning. Washington State at home, when we absolutely smashed them the last time they came to Berkeley. And then you have USC, which is sort of up and down. So maybe you call that a loss just to keep yourself sane. And then you have Stanford, which is lost 3 times in a row for, like, I think maybe the first time in Shaw's coaching tenure there. And then you have UCLA that, like, who even knows what's going on with Chip Kelly. So it just sort of, there's not a single, there's like starting to become fewer and fewer games left on the schedule where we're a true underdog. And so, yeah, I'm not going to come out here and like just bump up my wins. I think it's hard to bump up your wins above 8 regular season. So, if we start to look at this, maybe it's a loss in Oregon. I'm not calling it a loss at Oregon. Let's just say maybe it does happen. So your losses are Oregon, Utah, and then you choose between Washington State, SC, Stanford, or UCLA. I don't think we're going to lose against UCLA again. I do think we're going to beat Stanford. And then so maybe you lose USC and Washington State. So you lose 3 games in a row after, 3 games in a row with Oregon State sandwiched in that. So you lose 3 of 4, which just doesn't seem that realistic with this team. So things start to get pretty crazy. Arizona State's a big game. You go 5-0. There's a lot more on the table for this team if you go 5-0 right now than where we're at, and it's just sort of wild to even think about.
It's just, for me, when I'm looking at the schedule, I'm thinking, okay, there are surefire wins. Like Oregon State, I think, is a surefire win. There are capable wins, like the Washington State, the USC, the Stanford, and the UCLA.
And Arizona State.
Arizona State are capable wins, yeah. But there's not more than one definitive, like, we should be winning this game outside of Oregon State. And that's what scares me about this schedule is, sure, we can look on the bright side and say, like, we drubbed Washington State here and they got destroyed by UCLA. USC could be a different team every week, so we don't know which team we're going to get there. Stanford looks like crap this year, so there's that. UCLA also was 0-3 until they miraculously pulled off the craziest comeback I'd seen ever. So that's the thing, right? Like, I can argue it the opposite way for all of this. Like, I'm just looking at Utah. Like, okay, yeah, I think Utah's a loss there. But then you look at Washington State, and it's like, okay, which team are we going to get? The team that was scoring like crazy and stopping opponents from scoring the first 3 weeks, or are we going to get the team that that played against UCLA? SC, are we going to get the team that played against Stanford, or are we going to get the team that played against Fresno State? Like, and then Stanford is just, yeah. I don't think there's a question there. I think that's a win at this point. And then UCLA, it's like, did they turn the corner? Like, was what they did at Washington State like what they're going to be able to do now? Like, just offense, score left and right in quick succession. And that's what kind of scares me, is because we have these teams that are question marks, but we have them so late in the season that we just don't know what they're going to be like towards the end. But yeah, that's why, I mean, Nick was talking about this all over Twitter and was just, there doesn't, like, the expectation now on the season has been raised. Weirdly, just after 4 games, most fans have upped their expectation. The average fan, of course, guys like us who like report and do all these things on the team. Like, I think most of us have stayed the course, either at 7 or 8, or in your case, 9 wins.
8 plus bowl.
Yeah. So we're basically sitting pat. But for the average fan, it's like, wow, we're ranked 15th. Wow, we're 4-0. Wow, we haven't lost a game, and we beat number 13 Washington in Washington. Like, there's a lot of more expectation there. But and the expectation now is, are we going to be able to compete for the Pac-12 North? Not the Pac-12 championship, but are we going to be able to somehow push and run the table to get into that conversation somehow? The thing is, I think we can take the Arizona State loss if we were to lose on Friday. I think that if that's the goal, right? If that's the goal, is competing for a Pac-12 North share, or just being able to compete to win the Pac-12 North. The Arizona State game we could take as a loss. We can't lose the Oregon game if we want to do that. I mean, that's the big question mark. Is, I don't want to look ahead too far, which is, I mean, it's not even too far. It's only 2 weeks ahead, but that Oregon game, like, I think determines our season in terms of what we're aiming for. Not this Arizona State game, in my opinion, because the moment we win that Oregon game, we have wins against probably the 2 teams you're hoping to beat and run the table to get to the Pac-12 North title. And if it were ever to end in a tie, you have those wins over those 2 schools to get there. And so that's the win I think we need if we're going to do that. The rest of the schedule, of course, I mean, we need to win out or get close. But yeah, I'm going to stand pat by my 8-win regular season too. Did I say 8 wins or 7 wins? But somewhere right around there, I think we stay. I think we sweep the Washington schools, which is what I said. I don't think we're going to clear all 3 California schools. I think we're going to end up losing one of the 3.
It would be crazy. That would be nuts.
Yeah. But that's where I'm at. I guess we'll move on to another question from there that bleeds into this. Is that someone asks, how many wins will win the Pac-12?
Overall?
Yeah. Like, I guess they're asking from our perspective, which is you have to be able to win the North to get to the Pac-12 championship game, right? So
what, 10-2? I think
Oregon's out 10-2.
Yeah.
10-2. 10-2 means you're expecting Oregon and Washington State to lose at least one more game each.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, I could see that. I could see them cannibalizing themselves. Like, I could see Oregon playing Washington and then losing, and then like just the three of them eating each other up, right? Oregon beats Washington State, Washington beats Washington State, and Washington State beats Oregon.
Yeah.
Just there's the one losses each, which easily could happen. But yeah, I think 10-2 is probably right. You get to that number, and then it's based on just odds and what happened with the other teams.
Yeah, I mean, Oregon's got after us. They go Colorado at home, Washington on the road, and then Washington State at home, and then USC on the road. They're not going to win all those games. There's no way.
That Colorado game actually could be a trap game for them because Colorado surprisingly played well against teams that are way above their weight class.
Yep, for sure. And then you have Washington on the road, and then even SC on the road. And I mean, yeah, I think I could see Oregon struggling with that schedule. And then Utah. The big one was Utah losing. So that's sort of what kind of throws. That's why I say 10-2. So I think 10-2. Let's stick with that.
Yeah. I mean, with Utah's loss, though, it doesn't really hurt or help us in any way because they'd have to come out of the South anyways. To win the Pac-12, you need to get to the Pac-12 championship game and then win the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah.
So but Utah losing definitely throws a wrench into everyone's plans.
Big time.
Including
like Lee Corso, who I think had them going to the playoffs.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest wrench that it throws it into is college football playoff representation, right? Last hope is either us or Oregon at this point, depending on how the rest of the season goes. At least right now, we're one of the last hopes.
If Utah runs the table, they'll be back. Same thing with Washington. If they run the table, they'll be back, especially if we're this good. Then Washington looks better.
Yeah.
And it's an early game, and all those excuses start to come in. We got a lot of football left, so It's tough to say that. I just don't like when people are like, "Oh, Pac-12 is eliminated again," except for Cal's. I don't know. You don't know until you play out. The next 4 games.
You don't. Here's another question. This goes back to, I guess, there's 2 questions that kind of go back to the Ole Miss game, and then there's a couple questions about this upcoming week. So we'll move on to that and then pretty much close it out there. But here we go. Are you confident in Garbers as a starter, or do you want to see more consistency?
I think this one's I saw this. I think this is a really good question, but I also think it's actually pretty easy. Like for me, it's obvious that we need to see more consistency out of him. Like to look at one game and then kind of say, "Hey, we made it." I just sort of feel like that's.
Oh no.
So ultimately, I don't think you can say that, it's a given, but this is without a doubt and without question a huge building block and a lot of positive momentum. Because we saw something that clearly all the coaches saw and have been seeing for a long time. And by the way, the one pick that he threw in the Ole Miss game it's a totally fine error to make. I mean, he just didn't see. That was a tough throw. There's 3 guys there. He didn't see one of them. Guy made a nice play on the ball, and I loved Wilcox because you just saw him on the sideline, pushing his hands out, it's okay, it's okay. And I'm so happy he threw the pick and then recovered after, rather than going 4 touchdowns and no interceptions, because of the fact that we know that there's that history. So to have the turnover and go through that emotion and have the coaches give you the backing, huge positive.
Yeah, and it was all about how he came back after the interception, right? And he basically didn't lose a step. He didn't lose any confidence. The dude came out and just started throwing again like nothing happened. And that's the thing I wanted to see is when he was hit with adversity over the last 3 games at least, it seemed like it would just sulk more. Not that he was sulking just on the sidelines all sad faced, and that's not what I mean by the sulk. It's he seemed to be getting a little bit more inferiority complex of when he was on the field. Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? But then weirdly he comes out on fire in this game and has that interception, and then he comes back and with just a fire in his eyes, just stays aggressive again and was pinpoint on his decision making. And I just hope that this carries going into conference play. Maybe, but I mean, There's two ways this performance from Garbers ends. It's either one, it's a turning point in his Cal career, or two, it's just a flash in the pan. Like it's either one of those. I'm hoping it's the turning point in his career, because that changes the entire trajectory of the season, of next year and the following year, and it just changes the expectation that we're going to have on this team. If he comes out against Arizona State and he tosses 4 touchdowns again and he with 1 reception and leads us to a win, oh my goodness, like we're going to be looking far beyond just trying to win the Pac or compete for the Pac-12 North.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Another question here. Are you any less concerned about facing ASU? Or actually, sorry, there's one more question about Ole Miss. How concerned should we be about the injuries to our defense? And did the offensive game plan against Ole Miss change your opinions about our potential on that side of the ball? I think the second part of that question is actually a really good one.
I know, but I also kind of feel like we covered it too with Baldwin, and I think the biggest thing was we saw the receivers in a way that we didn't see last year. And so, I mean, there's the other side of the Ole Miss game is like the running game, was an issue. And so there's sort of a question within something that we saw. So you get to see the receivers, the passing game wakes up, and then the running game disappears. Give me a complete game against a Pac-12 type opponent, and then we can start buying in fully. But we're super excited, and I totally agree with that. So I think I totally agree with the sentiment that the offense like put it together in a way that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see that at the Arizona State game, because now Arizona State's going to look at this and go, look, Ole Miss basically said you're going to have to beat us with the pass, and we're going to shut down your run game. We beat them with the pass. Arizona State now has the game plan going, okay, we can't force them. We can't try and make them into a one-dimensional team. Clearly, they're able to do it. So they're gonna mix and match and try and compete with us on both sides or both avenues of attacking. And so if the Bears can come out and run the ball well and pass the ball well, regardless of if we're closing out drives with touchdowns or not, if we can maintain time of possession and get points on every drive, even without the touchdowns, I think that's a good stepping forward, like little benchmark that we can place. That maybe they're putting it together where we were a run-heavy team the first 3 games, and we got our passing game now, and we're slowly balancing it out as the season progresses. And then the first part about how concerned should we be about the injuries to our defense, not really, in my opinion, just because everyone practiced, as we said, everyone was suited up. No one was lost to season-long injuries other than Chinadu. And, that's as long as our starters aren't getting injured, I think that's the big thing. And even if they are, as long as they're not season-long injuries, there's enough good depth at all the positions now, in my opinion, that can kind of hold up until those guys are back.
I think I have a little bit more concern than you, but I agree with everything you said.
As you easily can.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it. I guess the last thing I want to talk about before we close is, was that third down a touchdown or not?
I mean, my answer to this is really easy. It wasn't a touchdown. It wasn't definitive. And any angle I've seen from the Ole Miss fan base has been horrible in trying to prove that point. And the 2 sideline angles I've seen have been definitive that the ball, wasn't clearly beyond the plane. But I do think it should have been reviewed. And I think that's, I wrote this long thing about how the Pac-12 refs have, this has been something that you and I have been railing against for a long time now. And we had a probably more egregious non-touchdown call in the Washington game when Chris Brown Jr. went into the end zone and they didn't call it a touchdown. And that was more obvious than this one. But it was also another case of where they don't have the right sideline angle, right? The Chris Brown play, same thing. Didn't have the sideline pylon. Like, get cameras on that. Like, this is ridiculous. It's 2019. How do you not have every single angle covering the end zone? It's mind-blowing to me that you don't have those angles. So, yes, it should have been reviewed. You shouldn't have to rely on a view because you are bad with timeouts. And that game should have never been in that position anyways. And I think I was, not thrilled to see it be there, but at least the Cal defense will learn from that and, not soften up as much as they did. I just think it's beyond my wildest imagination that game sort of ended the way it did, given where it was at, being up 15 with I swear it was like even less than 15 minutes in the game. So what about you?
I'm totally on the same boat. I think it should have been reviewed. The Pac-12 refs basically, so the timeline was they snapped the third down play with 18 seconds left. Then they called them down at the 1. They placed the ball. Fourth down placed was clocked at 10 seconds. And basically Matt Luke, after he had burned that timeout after that punt, and this was the weirdest play calls for me, is that on first and goal they ran, on second and goal they ran without timeouts, and they just ran up the middle. Granted, they got the yards, and then third down they scramble, and they get that throw that they don't call a touchdown. I think there's a case to be made that maybe the ball did cross the plane, but the weird thing is he tucked the ball into his body, and his back was turned to the side judge. So the side judge has no view of where the ball is when he goes down. He can only assume that the ball is basically like right where his armpit is, or where he caught the ball. And where he caught the ball was on the 1 yard line. They placed him down. What should have happened was the Pac-12 ref should have immediately called down and said this is under review, because there were only 10 seconds left on the clock. Matt Luke, on the other hand, has a decision to make here. It's either you're taking a gamble, right? You're on your fourth down with 10 seconds left. The clock is ticking. You have no timeouts. Do you risk sitting there hoping that the refs go into review and give you the 10 seconds back? Or do you get the play off and try and get that touchdown and then try and get the extra point conversion? Because you do get the extra point time after the clock runs out if you score the touchdown. So that's the gamble he needed to make. He decided to run with it. The moment he snapped the ball on fourth down with 10 seconds left, the review opportunity went out the window. Like right. You can't complain that they didn't review it if you didn't give the refs enough time to call down and ask for it to be reviewed. You can't retroactively go after. That's the whole thing about getting the snap off, if it's not in your favor, to move on to the next play, right? Because they can't retroactively go back 2 plays. Mm-hmm. So ultimately this comes down to Matt Luke's inability to manage the clock for Ole Miss. And if I'm Ole Miss, of course I'm infuriated that they didn't call that a touchdown on third down. But there's also no definitive angle that says that the ball crossed the plane. So even on review, I don't think they would have said the play stands as called or is confirmed. They would have probably said stands, because there's 0 angles that show that the ball clearly crossed the plane. Like if you know how camera angles work, like if you're looking from the 30-yard line at the goal line and you see the ball, you can't tell me that the ball is crossing the plane for sure or not unless you're standing literally on the goal line and seeing the tip break the plane of the end zone. And so that's where I'm at. But I'm in full agreement. They should have called it down immediately, and they should have made it a review, because if you're watching the game as an official, you have to understand that this is such an important call in the game. And they just decided to do nothing about it. They just kind of let the time run out.
Yeah, I mean, I would be upset if it happened to Cal. So I understand why everyone's upset. But
yeah,
at the same time, what I don't understand is like the conspiracy theories or anything like that.
doctored videos and photos.
Guys, the Pac-12 refs are bad. This isn't news. Join us in the long march against our subpar officiating. Larry Scott did a deep dive into the Pac-12 refs this offseason and claimed that they are as high caliber as the NFL. We all know that's not true. Michigan State fans, Ole Miss fans, Cal fans, and every other team in the Pac-12 can all rally with you all against, the Pac-12 officiating and hoping that it'll get better. We're aligned on that. Ultimately, I don't think the game would have played out any other way. I expect Cal to win, and hopefully we don't have to deal with any more of these last-minute finishes.
Oh, but we will.
Yeah, we will. We got Pac-12 after dark after all.
Yeah. All right, so that wraps it up for us here. We have a Friday night game, 7:30 against Arizona. I cannot emphasize enough, if you're in the Bay Area, please come out and show out for these guys. I think they easily deserve a full home crowd, especially it being a 7:30 game where everyone's able to make it. Granted, it's kind of tough if you work in the Bay Area with traffic and try to make it to Berkeley by 7:30. It's kind of difficult, but if you're able, it sounds like there's going to be a decent crowd. Mike Silver sounds like he's going to be there. Bryce Tregg sounds like he's going to be there. It's starting to sound like it's going to be quite a crowd.
Come out, support this team, and let's get a sellout at Memorial. It'd be awesome.
All right, and to wrap up, can I get your prediction for the Arizona State game?
28 to wait, I can't do that. 28-17 Cal.
Ooh, I'm going to say we finally break the 30-point margin. We get to 34 to 22. Does that work? Yeah,
maybe.
It does.
Yeah.
All right, that wraps it up for us from here on the Golden Blogs podcast, the Bearcast. You can find us on Twitter at CGB Bearcast. You can find me on Twitter at Rob11HWNG. You can find Andy at
Andy J Beast Mode.
And if you're already listening to us, great. But if you're listening to us on SoundCloud, we're also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. So please be sure to like, subscribe, do all those things, share us, and all that good stuff. I don't know what other things people do with these links these days, but it'd help us out a lot. And, of course, if you leave us a comment, I believe the only comment leaving possibility is on Apple Podcasts. But if you do, Andy will read it live on the air. I think our last comment came in 2017, so it's been a while since someone's commented about our podcast. But we'd graciously ask if you leave us a nice comment.
Definitely leave a review for sure, and come out to the game on Friday.
And that's it. And as always, go Bears.
Go Bears.